IB history students, happy Friday. Let's take a look at one of the things that you watched on the first day. Most of you have already watched it, and that was about the Belgian Congo and King Leopold II. I'll explain what was happening at the time and why, and we'll be looking at a map while we do so. So let's go into the course resources first, and we're going to look at what happens to the continent of Africa at this point in history. Because what ends up happening in and the colonization of Africa and Southeast Asia and later on in the 19th century, at the very end of the 19th century, the United States gets involved in this imperialist movement or colonial movement, and they do also acquire, the United States does, the Philippines and Cuba and some other territories. So this isn't something that just European countries were doing. This is also something that the United States did as well. But let's focus in on Africa, because that's what you watched yesterday. So, especially once Germany unifies, there are a couple factors that lead to competition amongst countries. One of those factors we've spent a lot of time on, and that is nationalism, that countries were becoming more and more nationalistic, and this put them into conflict with others. Nationalism doesn't stress cooperation with other countries, it stresses competition. And the other factor is, as industrialism increased and as the market took hold, there are two things that European countries needed, in talking just specifically about Europe here. One was, in order to build cities, in order to build the infrastructure of these major cities, they needed natural resources. Specifically, they needed coal and they needed iron ore. And both were found in abundance in parts of Africa. The second factor is the market economy. So as countries, as the market economy, what liberals had been supporting, what Adam Smith wrote in The Wealth of Nations, that the economic basis would be a capitalist one. Foreign markets were needed, so they needed to establish markets, and they needed to have the resources to build the infrastructure necessary to build the major cities that we see today in the way of coal and iron ore. What you saw yesterday was about Belgium, the Belgian Congo, this region right here, where as many as 10 million people may have been killed in that time frame, where you saw there were severe punishments. And you think about how that affected the future, how the European colonizers had a definite advantage in the way of warfare. So they were, maybe easy isn't the right word, but conquering people who were not as advanced in warfare or in those tools for warfare would make it awfully difficult to resist. So let's just think about the Belgians as they took the Congo, those villages in the Congo, instead of being able to function as they had for quite some time, in being able to gather food at certain times of the year to feed the villages, they weren't able to do that because each village was given a quota to fill on rubber. They made their money on rubbers. As vehicles were built, rubber becomes awfully important as well. But in the Belgian Congo, instead of those people being able to find food, they were forced to meet their quotas of rubber. This and then you extrapolate that out over even a larger region. This is what leads to, in large part, famine into the future. The gathering of food and the way that they met the needs of the people were completely thrown off by this system. And in some places, it was worse than others. And you can see that European powers all competed. The French had taken Algeria earlier. They had occupied Algeria beginning in like 1835. In the south, we actually saw, maybe you've heard of the Boers. The Boers were Dutch farmers that settled and still had some um, some control in some parts. They would get into conflict with the British during the Boer Wars during this period of time. Um, so European countries, European powers would collide here. They would completely throw off the people living there. They would force them to do things that they didn't want to. They imposed harsh punishments. Some countries and some regions significantly worse than others. And you saw the worst. The Belgian treatment of people in the Congo is among the worst.